Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 30th of September 2024. Saw him a little bit later today. My multiple sclerosis had a lot to say to me this morning in terms of fatigue and questioning whether I'm overdoing it, etc, etc. And then my brain fights back with, no, I'm obsessed with this and I'm obsessed with that. And whatever goes in my brain has to come out to you guys. So I was speaking to Pierre this morning. He was saying, look, hold back on your US politics stuff. And I'm like, nope, can't do that. It's so important for Ukraine, but also it's an obsession that I have as well. And I've always had that, actually, US politics. It's just nature of the beast. Now, I know I'm behind on mapping. And I have been talking with JR. JR has been working really hard on trying to automate the mapping updates, so it doesn't take me like 3-4 hours to do a mapping update, especially if I haven't done it for a couple of days. I will get a mapping update done today. It probably won't be an automated one. I'll be doing some training with him, hopefully, if I can grab him at some point over the next 24 hours or so. So mapping will hopefully get back on track. I know I keep saying that, but I haven't done it for ages. And it's so important for me to understand how what you learn, what we learn, what I find out in that goes into these hits and losses videos jives with how I understand a map and the situation on the front line. It's really important that we get both those senses to give us a greater understanding of the war as a whole, at the micro level particularly. Anyway, that's enough sort of rambling. Here's the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. What could we make of these? Well, I think it looks generally like another fairly challenging day for the Russians. 1,250 personnel loss is a huge number. 5 tanks is below average. 27 troop carrying AFVs is above average. It is not quite double the average, but still fairly significant. 27 artillery systems, interestingly, is much lower than we have seen, but above the daily average. But remember, the daily average takes into account early parts of the war, where you were seeing maybe the odd artillery piece taken out here and there. Nowadays, we've been so used to sort of 40, 50, even 60 artillery systems and beyond being lost in a single day. That you see something like 27, you think, well, that's not very good. But actually, it's still that's an I would guess a fairly unsustainable loss of artillery pieces. It just it depends how you define that term and over what time period you're talking about. But one anti-aircraft warfare system could be useful. 53 vehicles and fuel tanks and 16 pieces of special equipment. That 38 drones, obviously, there's this, like I've said a million times, there's this cutoff point in the night where they do these figures, and it doesn't include the whole of the previous night's or last night's actually drones, and it includes some of the night before, and it's a bit of a weird cutoff. Now, last night there's a massive drone attack, but the night before there's a relatively small drone attack of sort of 22, I think it was, and that would reflect part of the 22 with a few more from last night probably thrown in, and then they cut the figures off. Anyway, 53 vehicles and fuel tanks is a fairly challenging number. 16 pieces of special equipment is pretty useful for the Ukrainians there as well. So a little bit up and down, but still challenging for the Russians. I don't have an Andrew Perpetua loss list today, so we are going to look at just a range of different videos, but unfortunately I can't really play them to you, so I have to. They are linked below, though, as ever. The first two categories are hits and losses and strikes. Usually, sometimes I pick up extra tabs and they won't be listed below, but usually all of the videos are linked below. So if I'm not going to show you these things now in full, you can see them in full by clicking on those links in the description to the video. Destruction of a Russian T-90M breakthrough tank in the Kursk region. So this is showing that A, the Russians are attacking in the Kursk region, and B, that the Ukrainians are having at least some success in repelling these attacks. This is a T-90 very much on fire. I saw another T-90, it wasn't this one, that had been abandoned, and a drone just flew gently in, sort of like hovering around, and then went in the open hatch, and fundamentally it was on fire, should we say, quite a bit. So that's a couple of T-90Ms. I only point these out because they are the newest and the kind of best of the Russian tanks, supposedly. So again, in the Kursk region, a Ukrainian Leopard Stridsvan. So this is a Leopard 2A5 variant that the Swedes have made their own kind of thing, Stridsvan 122. Despite being hit by a Russian shell directly in the turret, it continues to carry out its combat mission. So this talks about the resilience of some of these better tanks, potentially. The tank is seen towing a damaged Ukrainian T-72 from the battlefield, even with its turret on fire. So the turret is on fire there, and it's still given a tow to the tank behind it. I think much of that white smoke could be smoke canisters going off, making it look worse than maybe it actually is. But anyway, interesting bit of footage there. Then we come on to another bit of Kursk footage, epic footage of a Russian defeat in Kursk, says PS01. Ukrainian military FPV drones and artillery repel a massive Russian attack near Plekovo village in Kursk region, and there's just an absolute ton of things getting blown up, and all happening in this one general area, which shows that the Russians are using a lot of equipment. They are on the attack, and the Ukrainians are doing a really good job of defending those positions that they have taken within Russia. And we'll come to speak about this in a second, but they are using the Russian constructed fortifications and trenches effectively to defend. So there have been some 360-degree Russian, for example, anti-tank ditches that Russians have used, which means it doesn't matter which way you're attacking from, really, or whether you're attacking, from the front of them or from the back, they can still be used effectively. So the Russians building those has actually aided the Ukrainians in defending that area, so they don't have to get excavators up there and build these things under, areas that might be under fire control, etc., etc. Gimler's cluster rockets are being used effectively over a concentration here of Russian military personnel, reportedly in the Kursk region again. So you can go and check that out. The point is of bringing all this together in Kursk is FPVs, fortifications, cluster munitions, Gimlers, artillery being used, tanks being used by the Ukrainians as well as the Russians. I mean, this is an area that we had the most dynamic warfare. It's becoming somewhat positional now, but they are still, both sides are throwing quite a lot against the other side in this area. I want to come on to that later. What else can we say about Kursk? Well, Forbes reports that Russian tanks are falling victim to their own defensives in a failed Kursk counterattack. Again, near Plekovo, so that seems to be where it's all happening. Failed when tanks became trapped in anti-tank defenses built by Russian forces, which Ukrainians exploited with successful drone attacks. And you can find that actually that's although it's a Forbes article, this is Euromaidan Press talking about it. And then here we have more footage of a Russian attack consisting of 50 heavy armored units attempting to advance towards the Oskil River near the village of Pischany. So this is halfway down the northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova. It's more in the Svatova area, obviously then down to Crimea. However, thanks to the effective coordination among units, including the 77th Separate Airborne Brigade, the 1st Operational Assignment Brigade in the National Guard Brevy, and a 43rd Separate Mechanized Brigade. The 43rd did quite a lot of work. Ukrainian forces successfully halted the Russian advance before it reached their positions. Achilles Battalion of the 92nd Brigade, that's another pretty famous one as well, reported the destruction or damage of 40 Russian vehicles on that day. And that's possibly the one I reported to you yesterday, where we actually listed a lot of that. Yeah, September the 27th. So, but there's just lots of footage coming out of some of these pretty monumental exchanges of fire, with the Russians really throwing some sizable mechanized assaults at the Ukrainians. And we have seen that reflected in the Ukrainian General Staff figures, where we've seen a massive uptick in combat asset losses over the last 5 days, maybe week. Indicates that the Russians are really trying to hammer home some advantage before the rain sets in and we start getting the Rasputitsa, as it's known as in Russian, or Bezhdorija, I think is the word in Ukrainian, which is the big muddy season that you see in autumn and spring as well. That can have a real devastating effect on the ability to do maneuver warfare. Not that either side do particularly much of maneuver warfare that we've seen up in Kursk previously. And now it's kind of positional warfare where one side, well, particularly the Russians, will try and assault the other side in their dug-in positions with huge amounts of equipment, but they do end up grinding out these advances over time. Really fascinating bit of footage, this, okay? And again, I can't really show it to you. It's frustrating. But Ukrainian soldiers in Toretsk. So this is an area where reporting from Ukraine suggested that the Ukrainians are fighting back in Toretsk, up in the northern part of Druzhba, just north of the railway line, north of Toretsk there, where, yeah, the Ukrainians are hitting the flanks, possibly with some success. Well, here's an example of what you've got is an infantry fighting vehicle coming up, releasing some troops, and then hammering the buildings. So that the target is this set of buildings that you can see there. I'll obviously mute it because, as you know, there will be huge music going on. So you've got a line of buildings, almost like terraced apartment blocks going along there, and this infantry fighting vehicle drives up alongside it. People get out the back. They go and get out some what look like TM62 anti-tank mines. You saw that right at the beginning of this video where you had the chap there. See if I can find that again. He gets out and he's holding, oh no, yeah, there it is, holding 2 anti-tank mines with some kind of remote detonation device on them. And he basically, as this infantry fighting vehicle rakes the building, you see it there with its heavy machine gun, with its autocannon, whatever it's got there. It's hammering the building, so it's suppressing fire so that the Russians inside that building can't like shoot back, and that allows these guys to run out and put these mines inside, just in the bottom flat of these apartment blocks. And they do that at 3 places along there. And then, my goodness, those mines basically bring the whole building down. It's absolutely incredible. So you see here, I think there's like one here, and one here, and the entire building falls down as a result of that mine exploding. It's absolutely incredible. Just trying to see if I can give you a sense of right at the end. Yeah, you see it collapse. So collapses there. So actually 2 points. Is there not a third as well? After a while, yeah, third one at the end as well. So 1, 2, 3, and the entire building collapses. Now the claim is that this eliminates a Russian group. I had no evidence of that, but the idea is that you got Russians inside that building, and they set those mines in there, protect the guys with suppressive fire, and then remotely detonate the mines, and the whole building sort of falls down. Wow. So this is functionally the same as using glide bombs to strike this building. You collapse in the building, although it's a damn sight more risky, right? But it's just a really interesting video there. Right, now we have another thread on stocks here. Worth a full read of this one about Russian reserves of S-300 and S-400. It appears that Russia struggles to repair stored systems. Most of the replacements for losses seem to come from active units being redeployed, and reserves are dropping fast now. Okay, let's just quickly run through this. Okay, Russian Aerospace Forces Air Defense Reserves, a thread. Like I promised earlier this week, I will deal with the current state of Aerospace Forces PVO reserves. And most of these inactive systems are stored in private companies, repair factories, others in technical bases. Okay, installations including hosting inactive ones are, and he lists those places, and then in the military units lists those other places that host these reserves. Only the first truly host systems, and the other ones are technical support units for active duty Moscow air defense. In other words, just these private companies appear to be the ones that host entire systems of air defenses that are in reserve. In one factory, most of the equipment has been dismantled, and the factory was refurbishing S-300, S-400 missiles as of 2023. This other factory, so that's a 1015, this is a 1019 factory. One of the most interesting installations, along with the next one, 2 S-300 PT and 8 S-300 PSPM batteries are stored here. Khabarovsk Radio Engineering Factory, the other big repair plant, 10 S-300 PS and PM batteries are stored here. Switching to military units, Omsk Complex Storage Base, blah, blah, blah. 2 batteries stored there. Remaining 3 technical bases of Moscow defense rings, mostly support vehicles, transporters, generators, masts, so that's more supporting batteries rather than storing them. And then we have another, no recent pictures after 2020 though. So there's some S300s supposedly stored in another one. Okay, so it's all about getting updated imagery of these plants to get a kind of recent understanding of where what is stored. And I actually shared with you this AS22 thread sometime back, the one that's in Chinese here. Uh, Detailed thread tells us that 105 transporter erector launchers disappeared from air defense positions in eastern Russia. So we know that they're pulling these systems back from right across Russia. Here's the image of where they're getting pulled from, which would suggest that they don't have them in deep storage to be able to take them from storage. So they're taking them from active positions and redeploying them to Ukraine. This other detailed thread tells us that 134 transporter erector launchers disappeared from air defense positions in northern Russia. So we've seen them disappear from sort of the Finnish border, from up near St. Petersburg. That St. Petersburg, we heard kind of fairly early on that they were taking air defense batteries from around there and pulling them down to Ukraine. So he then lists a current count for observed reserves. There are about 202 transporter erector launchers in store for 22 batteries, along with their radars and command and control equipment. So that's the analysis there. So what does this tell us? The Russian defense industry. So that sounds like a lot, like 202 transporter erector launchers. So those are things that actually fire the missiles and move and, raise up their launcher and then fire them. But of course, a battery will have sort of maybe 8 of those. So that constitutes about 22 batteries with their radars and command and control. So it's not just a launcher's useless without being able to know where to fire, without having the radar and the command and control. And you can see the here all of the known pieces of equipment there. So what does it tell us? The Russian defense industry cannot put back into service seemingly operational equipment, especially S-300 PS and PM. Reasons might be diverse: lack of spares, lack of qualified personnel, competing objectives with the export market. As of 2020, Russia had 57 S-400 batteries with 456 TELs, transporter electro launchers, in operational service. Current needs far outweigh what is available in reserves. That's a huge amount, like 57 batteries. That's not just the S-300, that's the S-400, the very best. So they had an absolute ton of these. So as well as the Ukrainians have done in retreating the Russian air defenses, they, just like with every other bit of equipment, they just have phenomenal numbers. The deficit has been ever growing as Russia has to defend against increasingly long-range attacks. So the issue is, though, as many as that sounds, if you think about Russia as that nation of Russia, the Russian Federation, and how big that is, and you have got nuclear facilities that need to be protected. You've got places all around Russia, all around Moscow. You've got palaces for Putin. Obviously, you're going to have like S1 Pantsir systems and whatever. There are other systems available, but Russia's a massive place, and Ukraine has shown that they can hit oil refineries, oil depots, ammunition depots, and they appear to be doing that whilst there may well be these systems in place. So do they need more systems to protect some of these places from further attacks, or now they've been attacked, do they move those to other potential type? They have all these dilemmas to weigh up, and a dwindling number of batteries, even though they have a huge amount, the deficit is ever growing. Defence Intelligence of the UK has been forecasting this back in November 2023, where they talked about a lack of relocation of strategic air defence assets. Further demonstrates how the Ukraine conflict continues to overextend Russia's military and strains its ability to retain baseline defences across its vast area. And that was obviously a year ago. From currently available Ukrainian MOD claims, at least 17 S-400 batteries have been affected by Ukrainian strikes, raids, or other actions. It involves either radars, TELs, or both. This is a conservative estimate, as a higher number could be impacted. Finally, what does it mean that Ukraine can severely impact Russian air defense forces and open up air campaign once the degradation level met a critical point? It's a bit of an unknown how many they've got operational, but we definitely know that they are struggling to replace that which is being attrited, and hence the redeployment from other areas. There appears to be some in storage, but the question is what's their situation? Are they being refurbished? Are they beyond repair? What is explaining that they have 220 tells in in storage, 22 batteries worth. What does that mean when they are? And I don't have an answer for this, but when they're redeploying from the Far East, you know, that they've got 22 batteries in storage, there's something weird going on. Anyway, a bit of data there. You can go and read that in finer detail at your own leisure. Andrew Perpetua getting enraged, rightly so again. I see people unironically claiming Ukraine is committing war crimes by attacking Russian soldiers with drones, which is no different than attacking soldiers with a bullet or a bomb, but that's not a war crime. That's what is war. I mean, drones hitting Russian soldiers is war. But what is war crimes, he said, is these people are suspiciously silent when Russia attacks an effing passenger train with drones. This is a passenger train, like a bit of attacking a civilian bus. These are drones taking out passenger trains. And those same people don't seem to cast their opinions. Right. 3 examples of Russia on fire. One that I reported yesterday, but my goodness, it got even bigger. So this is in Bernal. I think it was a furniture factory. Just incredibly big fire going on there. Then we had the Kiev hotel in Dagestan on fire. Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations writes that everyone was evacuated, but then people start jumping out windows, so it's clearly not the case. And then a severe fire with previous explosions occurred in Seninja City residential complex in Moscow. So another big fire at an apartment block in Moscow. Fire spread from the 5th to 8th floors. One of the residents jumped out the window to escape the fire. So, that's horrific. But just to let you know that, there are still multiple daily instances of significant fires taking place in Russia, which is anomalous as far as normal stats are concerned. And the Russians have admitted that. There was a Rebar assessment of that I reported to you 2 years ago that said already at that point that there was a really problematic spate of fires that were larger and were concerning sites that were significant. So there was a change of frequency, the change of size, and a change of place. Concerning the types of fires that you and the fires that you're seeing now compared to before the war. Okay, now moving on to distant strikes. A massive attack last night again. 73 drones were sent into Ukraine. 67 were shot down. 1 more Shahed flew back to Belarus. 3 more were lost on Ukrainian territory due to electronic warfare. So that's 71 out of 73 drones taken down. That is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And they're doing this on a nightly basis, but my goodness, it must be exhausting for the Ukrainians. I just hope that they're not exhausting interceptor missiles that are of high value. Okay, Ukrainian Air Force reported that, as well as 0 out of 1 Iskander-M ballistic missile, so a ballistic missile got through, and an anti-radar missile, like a HARM equivalent, a KH-31P also got through. Don't know what the damage that they did was. 1 cruise missile was shot down. KH-59 or 69 was shot down. But that's another huge night. They are clearly manufacturing a huge number of these, and something needs to be done about that. And this is what I mean by just consistent numbers here. This is a great infographic that pieces together all of the last, 30 days of drone attacks. Incredible. Ukraine's allies continue the catastrophic policies forbidding Ukraine from striking Russia's airfields, says Jay in Kiev, and their launchers. So Russia, as always, leans into weakness, pouring a record amount of missiles and drones onto the country in September. This is a record amount. It's just incredible. Now, what's that maxim? Was it Roosevelt that said it? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, the idea is that for Russia, no, it wasn't Roosevelt. It was just the observation that Russia only seems to escalate in light of weakness. So they don't escalate when the West is really strong and Ukraine is really strong to Russia. They seem to escalate when they can get away with it, which is kind of goes against the theory of escalation that seems to be prevailing at the moment. Anyway, yeah, so that is that. Oops, it's got that twice. That's how interesting I thought it was. Uh, Sadly, the strike on the Kotluban arsenal in Volgograd region, one of the target sites from the substantial drone attack from the Ukrainians 2 nights ago, didn't actually hit the site. So the fire was indeed. I did report that there was fire around it. Wasn't sure whether it was in it. And from satellite images, it does seem that the drones might well have got shot down short of the site and set fire to the grass around it. So a recent image of the GRAU Kotluban Arsenal in Volgograd region shows no visible damage to the arsenal itself. However, scorched grass is notable in the surrounding area. And I don't know whether that would include an air defense system or whether that was just scorched grass. Probably just scorched grass by the looks of it. So that's a shame that that one didn't get hit. Although there were other strikes, Milarova Air Base. It's going to be interesting to see what satellite images come from there, because that the firm's data does suggest that something was hit at the Milarova Air Base. Okay, and then near Rilsk in Kursk, talked about Kursk. Well, there's big fire somewhere around there last night, so don't know whether that was strikes, artillery, who knows, but something on fire up in the Kursk region. Okay, a few things to share with you in the other bits and pieces section. So, what do we have here? Russian commanders forced their troops into hopeless defense during Vovchansk battle, said Ukrainian intelligence. Of course, take it with a pinch of salt, coming from the Ukrainians. But I've seen some videos of a few Russians captured in Vovchansk in the aggregate plant. In September, Ukrainian forces reclaimed the Vovchansk aggregate plant, eliminating dozens of elite Russian fighters. They were holding out there. They were surrounded or semi-surrounded, held out there for an awful long time. And then I think when the Kursk invasion took place, Russians pulled some of their troops from the Vovchansk area and the Kharkiv directions and moved them to Kursk, and that allowed the Ukrainians to regain the initiative certainly in Vovchansk, moving through the center and pushing the Russians out of the Vovchansk aggregates facility. Now, that has involved quite a few, as I mentioned, certainly a few Russian POWs. I've also seen, it was heavily hammered by guided glide bombs as well from the Ukrainian side. And then the Russians have hit it subsequently, with the Ukrainians taking it with their own guided glide bombs. I've seen an image or video of a huge number or fairly significant number of passports, Russian passports that the Ukrainians had taken. I presume that was off dead Russian soldiers in the Vovchansk aggregates plant, which suggests that they did lose quite a few there, as indeed the Ukrainian intelligence is suggesting. Now, talking about interceptions of the Russian Shahids, here we have, and I've talked about this before, I've talked about how Russians should have done this quite early on or earlier on in the war, and lo and behold, they have started doing this, which is something like a mobile air defense unit doesn't need the sorts of physicality, and I'm not denigrating female soldiers here. I'm actually talking about age, physicality, whatever, male, female, old, young, the sorts of people that you need to operate mobile air defenses can be trained quite specifically. So they wouldn't need massive training because they're doing a very, very narrow job. So when you're talking about, well, I'm training a foot soldier to go and do offensive or defensive operations within a trench network or within maneuver warfare, you need to train him on all sorts of things like, first aid, using these guns, cleaning guns, using a range of different weapons, hand grenades and this and that, RPGs, operating in infantry fighting vehicles, doing this, doing that. That training, people complain about NATO training not being long enough, and etc., etc. But for operating in an SUV with a heavy machine gun on the back, you just need to be sent to a place to look for a Shahid up in the air, work out how to fight it, strafing fire or whatever, make sure you can hit it by shooting in front of it or whatever training you need is specific to just, you fire this gun, you maintain this gun. This is a gun you use. It's one gun, and all you're doing is you're driving around, finding a target, shooting it out the sky. Just do that every night. And quite often, you don't even see, you might go a month, 3 weeks, I don't know, without even seeing a Shahid, but you are driving around looking for these bad boys by being directed also, due to radar or audio or whatever target acquisition technique you have. So the point is, you can have all sorts of people doing this. You can have older people doing this. You know, for one of this team, it's just going to be literally driving an SUV. Um, okay, give you some first aid training as well, and you can operate the gun too in case this person gets tired or whatever. You know, but basically specify your training, and actually, you guys, you're only going to do this. You're going to get really good at doing this. And here, for example, we have an all-female crew called the Witches of Butcher. Fascinating video here that talks through their experience of talks through their experience of operating with small arms fire there, but also with their Maxim machine gun or whatever one they're using. Interesting video to check out. These are people who were formerly, one was a veterinary nurse, mother of three, one was a former teacher. The same with the men as well that are fighting in the war, that have their previous jobs and whatever. But it's just this range of lives that people have had, and it's just quite a juxtaposition going from a kindergarten teacher and then giving that up to try and shoot shaheeds out the sky. And here, yeah, we've got an all female crew, and this was something I was advocating much earlier on in the war. And worth looking at. That one's on Anton Gershchenko, so if you want to go and find that out. Quote, if I happen to have at least one down Shaheed drone on my account, I will consider my mission on this earth accomplished. And that's how important it is to these people. But it also shows that, you know, you've got an awful lot of these mobile units going around, and they're not always going to find a Shaheed, let alone shoot one down. So when you have 71 out of 73 Shaheeds taken out of a given night, I wonder how many mobile air defense units there are and what their success rate is. So these guys, you know, might not shoot one down. They might shoot their first one down after 3 months of operation. I don't know. Yeah. Now, rumors have started circulating again. So we have heard this before, that Kirilo Budanov will leave his post. So he's a guy in charge of Ukrainian intelligence. This happened exactly the same time with Zaluzhny, and despite denials, was later confirmed. But Budanov is even more popular, hasn't argued with Zelensky. So the only question is what job is lined up. So it could be not a case of him getting kind of sacked from that job, but actually moved to a different job. It's always good to do this, I think. Fresh eyes, just with any job in the world, actually. People get, you know, teachers in schools, you get stuck in particular classrooms, particular age groups. You're like, right, you need to freshen up. You need new ideas. We're going to move you from here to here. Or working in a manufacturing facility. Actually, we had some fresh ideas about efficiency, so we're going to move you to here, just have a bit of a shuffle and see if it kind of improves productivity, etc., etc. So it's not going to be any different here, although he will have an immense amount of knowledge that will be lost if he moves from that to another post, and someone will have to gain that knowledge, and then might be issues. Now, Dmitry Kuleba, talking about, he's a former foreign minister that's been moved to, well, actually, I don't know what position he does have at the moment. Anyway, he's saying that since Russia's invasion, and this is in light of my conversation yesterday with Tembi Powell, the Kiwi former mayor of Tauranga, who is working in Ukraine with a charity to support particularly medical provision. Check out that live stream yesterday. It was brilliant. Really enjoyed that. He's a great guy. Former military man himself. Anyway, he was talking about the number of medical facilities that have been here, and I was looking for the latest figure. Well, here we're actually serendipitously, Dmytro Kuleba says since Russia's invasion, at least 1,736 medical facilities in Ukraine have been damaged or destroyed, per the HRW, which is Human Rights Watch. Yesterday, a hospital in Sumy was hit, killing civilians. It's 2 days ago now. It also estimated that over 150,000 residential buildings have been struck by Russian forces. Add today's strikes in Zaporizhia to the list. That was yesterday's that I told you about. My deepest condolences to the people of Sumy, city where I was born, and Zaporizhia, city dear to every Ukrainian who continue to endure unimaginable loss and pain. Deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure is a war crime, yet calls for accountability remain unmet. Here's the idea. According to President Zelensky, this week alone, Russia launched nearly 900 bombs, 300 Shahed drones, and 40 missiles. So instead of just calling for accountability, give Ukraine every week the same number of bombs, drones, and missiles to defend itself. Okay, even every 2 weeks would work. Save hospitals, homes, and lives. If some argue this can't be done, How can we defend freedom and lives around the world if we can't match Russia's firepower in Ukraine? Well said, Gerashchenko. Now, the Kremlin is facing a backlash, and I've reported on this previously, from Russian military mill bloggers outraged at reports of specialist troops being sent to storm Ukrainian positions in order to maintain pressure on the front line. So we've heard that sailors from the Kuznetsov, isn't it, the only aircraft carrier that the Russians have that doesn't seem to be it's not operational now, and it doesn't seem to be, it's not likely to be operational for potentially, some are saying, forever. Might just be a case of cutting your losses. So they are being retrained to be sent onto the front line as sailors. But we have seen drone operators, we have seen mechanics, and all sorts of people just sent in to meet assaults because one presumes the Russians are desperate for personnel, and now there is this growing backlash against that by Russian military bloggers. Now, I never reported this previously when North Korea were doing it to South Korea, but this was a thing that the North Koreans were doing. They were using weather balloons to drop actually all sorts of detritus, like dirty nappies, and it was a kind of like a two fingers up to South Korea. Well, here, weather balloons with contraband from Belarus are attacking Lithuania. Just in the past week, there have been 250 such objects. One of them fell on the territory of an airfield in Vilnius. The head of the Lithuanian Border Guard Service, Rustamas Liubievas, said that Lithuanian law prohibits shooting down flying objects using firearms. Lithuania reports that these meteorological balloons are mainly used to smuggle cigarettes from Belarus into EU territory. So this is literally contraband rather than being used to do anything dodgy. But yeah, interesting that Belarus is where contraband is being smuggled from into the EU, and they're using this sort of method. Right. Some people ask, why is Poland so supportive of Ukraine? Why are some Polish people so vehemently anti-Russian? And all you need to do is listen to the rhetoric on the TV shows from Russian propagandists, and then see stuff like this. This is a badge. This is a patch on a Russian soldier, and it says insulating tape can fix anything, even Poland. So this blue insulating tape is going across a Polish flag to make it a Russian flag. In other words, you've got Russian soldiers running around with anti-Polish patches on them, suggesting that, do you know what? Yeah, I've got no problem with taking this war even further to the west and into Poland. And as Jakub Yarachevsky says, people sometimes ask me why our feelings for Russia are so intense. Well, here's your answer. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's enough from me. Hopefully that was of use, of interest. Thank you very much for all your support. It's really quite amazing. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.